Welcome to our sixth session on agroecology, science and practice. In our previous session, we talked about some of the agroecological systems belonging into the practices and scientific interventions that build into agroecological production approaches. Once again, I am Dr. Tadeo Kahigwa Tivasima, a lecturer at Mountains of the Moon University in the Faculty of Agriculture, and this course is particularly for the Masters of Agroecology. We will continue with the systems that belong within the mainstream of agroecology, and we have described at length one of the systems being permaculture. Today, we continue with conservation agriculture. And this is used widely around the world, particularly in areas where soil is prone to erosion. There are three main guiding principles in this system, including crop rotation, minimum soil disturbance, and maximum soil cover. Under maximum soil cover, we look at sowing immediately after harvest and leaving crop residues on the surface, particularly to address the challenge of soil erosion. Conservation agriculture is also looking at minimum soil disturbance, where we talk about minimum tillage, so that we are not disturbing the roots of crops, but also we are not interfering with the soil structure continuously. And where there is an extended intercrop period, because the rotation dictates it, cover crops are grown, and these cover crops prevent soil erosion. They reduce nitrogen leaching by between 65 to 70%. They increase available nitrogen to the crop that will be grown in the next season. They increase soil organic matter, improve soil structure by remediating some compaction and reducing weed burdens and increasing yields. So conservation agriculture is very key when it comes to implementing agroecological farming practices. Another system is organic farming. And this is a farming system aimed at creating integrated and socially, environmentally, and economically sustainable production systems. Welfare, food security, safety and quality of food, social justice, and financial viability, as applied to also agroecology, where we are talking about the sustainability being economic, ecological, and social. But also, with organic farming, we look at the four key principles: the health, ecology, care, and fairness, which are also embedded within the agroecological elements. Organic farming looks at farms that are extremely dependent on locally or farm-derived renewable resources and management of self-regulating ecological and biological processes. It emphasizes closed production cycles, so minimizing the nutrient outflow by ensuring that only the product that is required at the market is taken, not with the residues. For example, unprocessed products like banana with peeling is not a recommended option with organic farming, where you find that a lot of nutrients that would be recycled into the soil are taken, for example, with the banana peel, which is not required in a consumption community that is not dealing with production. So you find a lot of nutrients being heaped as waste in the cities, and this actually organic farming as one key system in agroecology is prohibited so that we can attain the retention of nutrients within the farm. The system minimizes reliance on external inputs to enhance self-reliant and self-sustaining systems. When I mention this, you hear a lot that was already being mentioned in the agroecology elements, especially the element of recycling. Organic farming practices include maintaining soil fertility using crops such as legumes and green manures, conserving nutrients by aiming to close cycles, avoiding waste and unnecessary exports, using relatively insoluble mineral nutrients sources such as rock phosphate in preference to high solubility or processed forms, as opposed to synthetic fertilizers which are less soluble. Reducing energy use and increasing reliance on renewable energy sources. So organic farming would, for example, use wind energy, solar energy, as opposed to fossil fuels. The practices of organic farming also include using shallow plowing, minimum tillage, managing manures and slurry to conserve nutrients and avoid pollution. So if livestock is integrated on the farm, use it to make biogas and produce slurry, which will actually be used as a form of fertilizer on the farm. Using crop rotations and polycultures to restore soil fertility, help control weeds, avoid pests and diseases, provide sufficient livestock feed, and maintain profitability on the farm. These are some of the benefits that are associated with organic farming as applied in agroecology. Replacing biocides for weed, pest and disease control with preventive cultural measures, relying on homegrown feeds for livestock, reducing pollution, mixing livestock species such as sheep and cattle. This you will remember in the element of diversity, where within and among enterprises we have to integrate diversity. Control parasites and diseases, improve grassland management, all this through diversification of within and among enterprises. Maintain animal health by preventing the onset of pests and diseases through proper breeding, proper rearing and feeding, proper housing for livestock, ensuring we have health plans in preference to prophylactic medication. Instead of relying on treatment, we rely on prevention. Promoting animal welfare, assuring that the animals exercise enough and actually have access to conditions that would be near nature in relation to their natural conditions, rather than intensive
zero grazing of livestock, which is not allowed their natural conditions to exercise, and also to have natural mating instead of relying on artificial insemination, for example, but which can actually be promoted also, especially when we need to improve breeds. But also good bulls, for example, can be kept, and natural mating is occurring on the farm as opposed to manipulation of animal rights. Agroforestry, which is well known and well established, but is not implemented on smallholder farms in the appropriate sense of what agroforestry should be. And we have different ways of doing agroforestry. Agroforestry involves integrating trees among crops and animals, and it can be done in different ways. It involves a combination of elements of agriculture and trees, and the production of a wide range of products which include food, fuel, fodder, forage, fiber, timber, gums and resins, and medical products. Also, agroforestry is intended for recreation and ecological services. It is a multifunctional land use approach that balances the production of commodities with non-commodity outputs, such as environmental protection and cultural and landscape amenities. So the purpose for which agroforestry is practiced, it varies and actually produces different systems of agroforestry. Agroforestry can be differentiated from agriculture and plantation forests by its characteristics, mainly the greater structural and functionality of complexities by the multipurpose trees, the production of multiple outputs balanced with protection of resource base. We have different agroforestry practices, for example, early cropping, planting trees on boundaries, fences and hedges, trees on soil conservation structures, fodder lots, riparian forest buffers, others. We also have early cropping, where crops are grown between lines of trees and shrubs that are managed and spaced at regular intervals. It involves problems of declining soil fertility in situations where farmers cannot afford to use inorganic fertilizers at the recommended rates, and the trees provide fodder, small size wood, and improved microclimate. However, early cropping has some challenges. For example, where the trees compete with the crops, there is also high establishment and maintenance labor costs associated with early cropping. Here we can see an example of an early cropped farming system, where the farmers have a line of trees, agroforestry trees, with the maize, but also in the tea, where a lot of fuel wood is used for tea processing. Instead of cutting trees from a forest, we can produce this wood within the tea, and it is playing the role of managing the microclimate within the tea plantation, but at the same time producing the required firewood biomass, and both within the tea plantation but also on the boundaries of the tea plantation, as you can see. Early cropping is not recommended for areas with annual average rainfalls that are less than 600 millimeters. So if we look into our local limb database and we see that an area has less than 600 millimeter rainfall, then in such an area, early cropping is not recommended, because there will be a competition between the trees and the crops. Examples of species to include in alley cropping are, for example, Leucina, Alliandra, Gliricidia, and Cassia species. Sesbania, which is also nitrogen fixing. These are some of the recommended agroforestry trees that can be applied in alley cropping. We can also do agroforestry by planting trees on the boundaries, and this is normally to avoid congestion of the field with trees, and the trees are also a good form of boundary demarcation. Some of these trees include Erythrina, the Ficus, Dracaena, Cordia, Croton. These are trees that can grow well on the boundaries and serve also other purposes. Eucalyptus, pines, and acacia are not good for boundary marking because eventually they will actually affect the crops within the fields because they are deep-rooted and they are heavy water-consuming tree species. Other negative effects of boundary crop planting of trees as an agroforestry system is that the roots compete, especially if you are using these heavy feeding tree species, and also you could create conflict with neighbors that are maybe opposed to planting such trees in the boundary. Here you can see a good picture of trees that are planted on the boundary, but also are used as a hedge to face off paddocks for cattle. Fences and hedges also can be used as live fences, combined